This episode is brought to you by Thorne, and I have some incredible news for any of you that are in the military, first responder, or medical professions. In an effort to give back, Thorne is now offering you an ongoing 35% off each and every one of your purchases of their incredible nutritional solutions. Now, Thorne is the official supplement of CrossFit, the UFC, the Mayo Clinic, the Human Performance Project, and multiple special operations organizations. I myself have used them for several years, and that is why I brought them on as a sponsor. Some of my favorite products they have are their multivitamin Elite, their whey protein, the Super EPA, and then most recently, Cinequil. As a firefighter, a stuntman, and a martial artist, I've had my share of brain trauma and sleep deprivation, and Cinequil is their latest brain health supplement. Now, to qualify for the 35% off, go to thorne.com, thorne.com, click on sign in, and then create a new account. You will see the opportunity to register as a first responder or member of military. When you click on that, it will take you through verification with GovX. You'll simply choose a profession, provide one piece of documentation, and then you are verified for life. From that point onwards, you will continue to receive 35% off through Thorne. Now, for those of you who don't qualify, there is still the 10% off using the code BTS10, Behind the Shield 10, for a one-time purchase. Now, to learn more about Thorne, go to episode 323 of the Behind the Shield podcast with Joel Totoro and Wes Barnett. This episode is sponsored by 511, a company that I've used for well over a decade and continue to use to this day. And 511 is offering you guys, the audience of the Behind the Shield podcast, a discount on every purchase you make with them. Before we get to that code, I want to highlight a couple of products that, again, I personally use today. One of the most impressive products they just released is their Rush Backpack 2.0. Now, for many of you, whether you're going to the fire station, the police station, whether you're traveling with your family, whether you're taking training courses, we have to fly, we have to drive, we have to take trains. And I have to say, I own multiple backpacks, many of 511's different ones, but as far as a day pack, this one was the most impressive. There are so many different compartments. The way it sits on your back is incredibly comfortable. If you are a concealed carry person, there's also a spot for a weapon. So they've thought of multiple things that a man or woman would have to do on a daily basis. That is in addition to all of the products that I talk about a lot. Their uniforms, fit for men or fit for women in the first responder professions. The footwear that they offer, whether it's the Norris sneaker or the Atlas system that is designed for foot health and therefore knees and back and hips and shoulders and neck. As a civilian, I live in a lot of their clothes as well. Their jeans stretch. You can actually squat down in them. We live in Florida here, so I wear a lot of their shorts, which again, very, very lightweight material. You can get it wet and it will dry almost immediately. And then moving to the fitness and tactical space, I used to have just a regular weight vest. Recently, I switched to a 511 vest and actually bought ballistic plates as well. My thinking was simply, if I'm going to have a vest, why not have one that protects me as well? And that TAC vest is trusted by law enforcement all around the country. So I mentioned they were going to offer you a discount code. So if you go to 511tactical.com and enter the code SHIELD15, SHIELD15, you will get 15% off, not just that one purchase, but every time you visit their store. And if you want to learn more about 511, their mission, their products, then listen to episode 338 of the Behind the Shield podcast with the CEO and founder, Francisco Morales. Welcome to the Behind the Shield podcast. As always, my name's James Gearing, and this week it is my absolute honor to welcome on the show Marcus Capone. Now, for those of you who've listened to multiple episodes, you have probably heard at least one Navy SEAL talking about the incredible success they had with Ibogaine for their TBIs and PTSD. Well, the man behind the non-profit vets that sent many of these sailors through this program is Marcus Capone. So in this incredible conversation, we discuss a host of topics from his own journey into the military, ascending to the Tier 1 level, his own mental health struggle, finding psychedelics, the healing power of Ibogaine, and so much more. Before we get to this incredible conversation, as I say every single week, please just take a moment, go to whichever app you listen to this on, subscribe to the show, leave feedback, and leave a rating. Every 5-star rating truly does elevate this podcast, making it easier for others to find. And this is a free library for you, Planet Earth. So all I ask in return is that you help share these incredible men and women's stories so I can get them to every single person who needs to hear them. So with that being said, I introduce to you Marcus Capone. Enjoy. All right. Well, Marcus, I want to say thank you so much for coming on the show. And I also want to say thank you to Ryan Parrott for connecting us. And so welcome to the podcast today.
Yeah, thank you so much. Ryan, thank you if you're out there. And James, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here and humbled and always grateful for having good friends. And this is going to be great. So thank you.
No, thank you. And I will get into why, but obviously many of the SEALs I've had on the show, you and the organization that you've created with Amber has helped so many lives. So I'm really, really excited to kind of go down that path with you as not only your personal experience, but again, how after leaving a life of service, you found another way to continue that service. I think it's important. So where on planet Earth roughly are we finding you today?
So today I am in the lovely city of Coronado, California. So this little peninsula that sticks out, I guess, off of the city of San Diego, and there's a bridge. You fly into the international airport, and within 13 minutes you're in Coronado. And half the base is Naval Air Station, and the other half is a beautiful city, and it's pretty wonderful here. And what a lot of people don't know is that this is where SEAL training, BUDS, takes place. Right, literally 5 minutes from my house. And I don't think most of the world knows that. It's public knowledge, but it's pretty wild that individuals stay at the Hotel del Coronado and they see these freakishly looking individuals that are running down the beach with boats on their heads or doing a swim out in the ocean. So it's pretty cool. And we just love it here. It's beach is close. The neighborhood's great. You can, kind of hop in a golf cart and go anywhere or take a walk and be at Starbucks in 5 minutes. So what's not to love, except for some steep taxes here in the state. Other than that, they call it the sunshine tax. At least that's what I tell myself after leaving Texas and coming back out here.
Yeah, they're pretty good in Florida. We don't have quite as many taxes and we still have the sunshine, but I think the humidity takes away from it. So we pay tax in humidity, I think.
That's right. And, a few hours from the mountains and a beautiful Pacific Ocean, and it's all good. I can't complain.
I drove to Anaheim because that's where I used to work, Anaheim Fire, from San Diego a few years ago now on a visit. And when I was going up PCH, there was some sort of operation going on. It was amazing. So I pulled over and stood there, and there were, gunships and every sort of craft, aquatic and aviation was taking part in some obviously massive multi-company organization, but it was absolutely incredible to watch.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. James, where was that exactly?
I want to say, if I'm not totally screwing it up, probably about 30 minutes north of San Diego, if I've got that right. So, and this would have been several years ago now, but obviously it's a known place because there was a kind of pullover spot and a whole bunch of other people were watching too. But yeah, pretty phenomenal. And not often you get to go to the beach and watch a gigantic military operation practicing right in front of you.
Yeah, that's right. I'm wondering if it is up near Camp Pendleton, Marine Corps base. That's, I'd say probably 45 minutes north of San Diego, and then you have to drive probably about 20 minutes on the PCH to get past it, and then you're in San Clemente. And there's a lot of activity that happens there. They have, I forgot the name of the craft, but the assault crafts there, and they do a bunch of, rotary wing work, both right across the PCH and then hop back over to the main base at Camp Pendleton. And so it's pretty cool. Every time you drive by there, you see something fun going on.
I think it was. Now you say that, I'm thinking of Coronado, but yeah, it was Pendleton probably that I was closer to. So yeah, absolutely. All right. Yeah. Well, then So before we even get to your timeline, then, the West Coast SEALs, obviously Coronado is kind of the base for them. Was it something that you just never moved away, or have you kind of moved away and then moved back as a base again now?
Yeah, I was medically retired actually in 2013, and we moved up to LA. We moved up to Calabasas for a year. I got a really, really good position at Morgan Stanley private bank, and I thought that I wanted to do that for the rest of my life. That lasted about a year, but it was a great step off into the private sector. And after about a year, I found my way at a private equity firm at a New York City Fortress Investment Group, and I started to commute from LAX to the East Coast, and I only did that for a few months, and that was just starting to get really challenging. And so, long story short, Amber, my wife's dad, had taken the offensive coordinator position at University of Texas football, and so we decided to kind of move halfway. And so we moved to a suburb of Dallas called South Lake, and it was great. It was good for the 7 years that we lived there. And as soon as our kids graduated, our daughter wanted to go to school in California, and she's a freshman at San Diego State, and we decided to move back. And so, with kids out the door and my, mother in Florida and my wife's family in the Midwest, we didn't know really where to go. So we always said, when we get back to California, we'll probably live somewhere between Coronado and Newport Beach. We just kind of love a lot of we love most of the beach towns. And so right now we're in Coronado, but we're actively looking. And I think within a month, if we got back on here, I would tell you we will either still be living in Coronado or somewhere up the coast, either in North County, San Diego, or potentially in Orange County.
Yeah, it's gorgeous there. When I worked for Anaheim, I first started in Burbank, which was typically the moving to LA story. I was under the Burbank airport living in an absolute rat hole. But as I progressed and got some money under me, I ended up at Huntington Beach. Now, not on the beach, kind of more towards Westminster, but yeah, I mean, gorgeous down there. It really is.
I love Huntington. I do. It's like kind of more my style. I grew up in an East Coast beach town in Long Beach, and I could definitely live in Huntington. Prices there actually are a lot better than like if you're looking at Newport or Laguna or some other places. But I think Huntington Beach is great, and so we'll see where we end up. But for me to be close to the water is important. If I can be on a board or with fins on, or with a dive mask, I'm good to go.
Brilliant. Well, you mentioned Long Beach and you mentioned football, so I know those kind of factor into your earlier story. So let's start at the very beginning. Tell me where you were born and tell me a little bit about your family dynamic, what your parents did and how many siblings.
Yeah, I was actually born in Queens. Both my parents are from Flushing and Bayside. My dad went to Holy Cross High School in Flushing, all boys Catholic high school from 60 to 64. And my mom went to Bayside High School. They didn't know each other. They grew up less than 3 miles apart, but didn't really know each other until they're in their, I guess, late 20s. But yeah, so my dad was an altar boy at 4 years old, Catholic school, like strong Catholic school upbringing. And my mom comes from a Jewish family, Kaplans, Ukrainian Jews. And they kind of raised me with no religion, just kind of just threw me out there. But I grew up very, very busy. Like I never felt like I was ever bored. And I played a sport from the day I could remember. I was on skis at 3 years old. And I could actually have some memories of that at Keystone in Colorado, where I learned how to ski. And I think I was thrown in the pool right when I turned 4. And so, that's all I knew. And then, gradually grew into everything: wrestling, baseball, football, basketball. Even though I grew up on Long Island, I had a short stint in lacrosse, but lacrosse and baseball overlapped. So yeah, it was just really just a very busy life in sports. And my dad was, pretty tough on me when it came to athletics. And I grew up, as I mentioned, in an East Coast beach town. So we had a great swim team. I couldn't wait to be a lifeguard when I turned 16. And that was like the dream job you got paid a ton of money to, sit on the beach all day, work out, run, do pull-ups and push-ups and swim and all that good stuff. So, it was awesome. But, my parents didn't know this at the time, but I was supposed to be born in Southern California. That's why we're here now. But yeah, I didn't go to public high school from Long Beach. I actually traveled an hour each day to Holy Cross in Flushing. I kind of followed my father's footsteps there. They had great sports programs, and I had played Pop Warner football with one of the individuals whose dad was the head coach at Holy Cross at the time. And so I commuted every day for 4 years. I took the train 20 minutes to Valley Stream, and the head coach at the time, Coach Tom Pugh, would pick me up, and he drove me the rest of the way in. So it was a little longer than an hour each, at least going in, and then with traffic, probably longer than that. And so I did that for 4 years. And then I had some injuries my junior and senior year. And although I was a good athlete, I didn't know what I was going to do at the time. So I got recruited to play at Nassau Community College, which I think still today, it's one of the top junior colleges to play football in the country. And I wound up getting a scholarship to Southern Illinois University out of there as a quarterback. And I joke with people. I said, I went to Southern Illinois, and I said 20 other guys on the team went to Michigan and Ohio State and Syracuse and Georgia Tech and all these big football schools. Maybe not Georgia Tech, but anyway, so it was good. And that's where I met Amber. So I met Amber. She was going into her senior year of college, and I was actually, I was dating the coach's daughter. Her dad was the head coach at the time at Southern Illinois University, and he recruited me from New York to play. But I didn't meet her until after he left. He went to coach with Gary Barnett at Northwestern a few years after they had their run. And that's when I started dating the coach's daughter. So we could go into that for a long time. But college was great. I loved every minute of it, maybe too much. And when I graduated, a lot of stuff happened when I graduated. So it was graduation. Amber was pregnant. We got married. We had our son. I enlisted in the Navy, and the rest is history.
That's a hell of a journey. I want to go back all the way back, a couple of generations for a second. You said about Ukrainian on your mother's side. Do you have any relatives? And then do you have any perspective, either family-wise or maybe even from deeper into your career, on that whole crisis that we're going through at the moment, or they're going through? We're not going through it.
Yeah. I just have to say, I don't know. I grew up in like that household. I call it like the typical Long Island household. Maybe it wasn't so typical, but, religion wasn't like a big deal in the household. There wasn't a whole lot of patriotism. I heard a lot about music and Woodstock, and both my parents were hippies at one point in their life. Maybe that's how I decided to start a psychedelic nonprofit. I don't know. But anyway, but yeah, I was just different than both of them. Matter of fact, when I had that first call with them in college, told them I was going in the Navy to be a SEAL, they said they just looked at each other and they were just like, what the fuck is wrong with him? I thought it was the greatest thing ever, of course. And I'm sure they're fine now. But I'm off track, James. Where are we at?
No, it's okay. So, I was going to ask you as far as, the Ukrainian perspective.
Yeah, the Ukrainian. So go back to the Ukraine. I don't know. So my mother's side of the family, I don't know how many generations had come over from the Ukraine. I'm assuming right after World War II. But I don't know I don't know specifics, and we weren't very close to both sides of the family. I don't know why, but my family consisted of myself, my mother, and my father. And we had a ton of animals, always had dogs and cats, but that was it. We didn't really see a lot of cousins and aunts and uncles, and we did time to time, and they were all amazing. But I just thought it was, when I met Amber, who was the complete opposite, came from this family in the Midwest that was just massive. And there was always like all the families got together on Sundays. And so I don't know, maybe it had to do with, I think my dad was a wise guy back in the day, banged around with some of the Italian families. And I think when I was born, they wanted to get away from all that. And so moved out to the island to have me and kind of raised me in a neighborhood away from some of the antics that were going on in Queens and the five boroughs at the time. So, but yeah, I don't, I wish I knew. I know, we're doing a lot to figure out how we can help the Ukrainians, figure out the mess that they're currently in. So we're trying to do some work on the nonprofit side, at least on the mental health side, trying to help them with resources and figure out some game plans. We're actually working with pretty high up government officials from the ministry there, and we'll see what happens in the near future. But we're actually helping them come up with some options and some game plan, and it's going to be a long game. The individuals that we've spoken to think that actually this war is going to go on for years, so it's not going to end anytime soon. Because our question was, hey, when do you want to get started? Would you want to implement these treatments in the near term, or do you want to wait until the war's over? And their response, right from the mouth of one of the individuals in the Ukraine, said, Marcus, this war is going to go on for a long time, and so we just need to get started in terms of training therapists and unregulating some of the medicines there. And we brought in, obviously some other experts to help with that, but they're going to be there for a while.
That's so sad to hear, but I mean, look at Afghanistan. That was 20 years. So,
right,
yeah,
right. Nothing happens, too quickly, and the Ukrainians are a tough bunch, and they're not going anywhere. And now, of course, the EU and NATO, everyone's stepping in. Russia's they have a much tougher battle than they originally expected. So,
yeah. Well, thank you for that perspective. Well, speaking of the military then, so you're playing football, simultaneously dating the coach's daughter, timeline forgiving, of course.
Right.
Talk to me about your career aspirations when you were playing. Were you hoping to go pro? And if not, what caused that shift into the Navy?
Yeah. So I had the juvenile mindset that I thought I was going to go play NFL football for 30 years. My dad wanted me to really play baseball, play Major League Baseball. And he just said, so much easier on your body and this and that. And I don't know, I really wasn't listening to it. I loved football. I loved like that whole just like team aspect and the just everything that comes with football, and you kind of lean on one another and you can't be an individual. And so, yeah, I thought I would play ball forever, but that of course didn't happen. And I really didn't think about time in the military until it was my junior. I think it was the start of my senior year or the end of my junior year. We were just chatting about this today, actually, on another call. I saw a special on Discovery, and I don't know if it was, I think it was class 208. It was actually Andy Stump's class, ironically. And I did Andy's podcast a few months back. We didn't talk about that at all there, which we should have, but it was his class. And I just remember thinking like, this is awesome. And Amber actually has better recollection of it. She said, you were really intrigued in all the water evolution. So like all the, drown proofing and knot tying and stuff that you're bouncing up and down on the deck of the pool. And I just looked at that stuff and I was like, that shit's easy. I was like, anything in the water, like, let's go. I'm down. And that was it. And it never, like, nothing matriculated from that though. It just, life went on. And then, I didn't ever talk about this like years ago, of course, especially in my time in the teams, because I didn't want to get like roped up and taped and beaten. But one night, my roommate went on to have a stellar career. He was a four-year starter at strong safety. And then he went on to fly F-18s and went to Top Gun and everything else in the Marine Corps. And we were watching, what came on that night was G.I. Jane. And we're sitting there. And of course, when you're a college student who really doesn't know anything about life, sees something that come on TV, you just assume like, this is it. This must be it. And so all they talked about there were, Navy SEALs, and I think they called it some unit CRT, whatever it was that I didn't know. Of course, I thought it was all real. They just talked about this mythical unit that was like the best of the best, soldiers and special operations guys, and that just intrigued me. And like when you watch the training, right, like people are suffering and people are quitting, and they talk about the rate that only 25% make it, and like just all of that was just more fuel to go, oh man, like this is hard, this is tough. And even though it was my like Hollywood vision of really what the SEAL teams were like, it completely intrigued me. And then of course that really started. So couple the Discovery Channel show, and then G.I. Jane, which I freaking still laugh at. Of course, none of that shit's real. But and then I started reading like every book that I could get my hands on. I read, I probably read over 30 books, most of them written from Vietnam era frogs. And it was just great. Each book I read, I got more and more intrigued from wanting to do exactly what those guys were doing. And the more they talked about how difficult it was to get through buds, like the more I wanted to go. And, the more they talked about operations in Vietnam, going after like high value targets, the more I wanted to do that. And so it just became an obsession, an addiction, a focus, whatever you want to call it. And I guess the rest is history, but we're going to talk about all that history in between. So
absolutely. Well, just before we progress into, adulthood, one thing that really was kind of made very visible to me about probably 2 years into the podcast, about 4 years ago now, and I'd never thought about it prior. When we talk about mental health in, fire, police, military, a lot of times the binoculars shift to, oh, it's what you see, it's what you do. But actually, when you take a step back, you got to remember that we've had 20, 25 years prior to that to be a human being on this earth. When you look back now at your childhood, were there any elements that you consider like childhood trauma? And then also I've heard you talk about this as also the TBI element too, the head trauma element. Yeah.
Great question, James. And before I keep going, you were a lifeguard, weren't you?
I was, yeah. Never on the ocean though. So I did the open water, and I did pools and water parks and stuff.
Cool. Very cool. All right. Best job ever, I think. So I think I had some childhood traumas. Again, what I thought was normal as a kid, your dad backhands you, or, I saw some pretty, I saw stuff that only till recently did it really, I remember or think about it, because I never really thought about it. But I definitely, growing up, at a very young age, I'm talking about like 4 years old, I can remember my dad putting his hands on me, and it wasn't, looking back, that wasn't cool at all, because like, what was I was about this big at that time. So he had a really, really bad Irish and Italian temper. And sounds like his grandfather's was worse. And I heard his grandfather's was even worse. So generational shit that was happening, happened. And, I couldn't count the number of times that, he put his hands on me, whether he open hand, closed fist, belt buckle, broke bones in my wrists. I watched him do things to my mom that were just not, it's just a kid shouldn't see. And so, and aside from the fact of him, just driving me in sports, So maybe all that put together is a reason why, one, I couldn't wait to get far away to school. I had offers to go play ball in the East Coast, but I just wanted to get away. And so maybe that had something to do with it. And maybe that's, part of the reason what pushed me into special operations. I don't know. So that's the psychological piece, if you want to call it, maybe some of the stuff growing up. And then, and I'm being pretty, I'm being pretty high level here, like there's we can go into a lot deeper stories, but I don't know if it's important.
Yeah. I mean, feel free. The door's open, so you go wherever you'd like to.
Yeah. Well, cool. Thank you for that. But yeah, then, on the TBI side, I still struggle with it, even though, I have brain scans that show I obviously have some stuff going on in there that's probably affecting or has affected me in the past. But I think I started playing tackle football at 7. I think Archie Manning wouldn't let his kids play tackle football until they were in high school. So all the sports that they've played, and as good as they got, he didn't let them like get touched until they were, let's say, 14, 15 years old. I remember my first hit that I could really remember at 7. And the gear in 1983 was probably shit. And I remember at 7 playing against this guy. I think his name was Jarvon Jackson. He was a 10-year-old. He looked like Walter Payton, and he hit like Ronnie Lott. And I remember trying to stuff the hole. I didn't even know what that meant at 7 years old, and putting my head down like this and literally getting run over helmet to helmet and being knocked like so hard that I didn't even know which way was up or down from this 10-year-old monster. So, and then I had a career of everything, sports up until through my senior year of high school, senior year of college. So I played, I was a football player all the way through, and I skied and did everything else. And so I had definitely a history of hard head-to-head contact pretty consistently. And then that was through, I guess, 22 years old. And I joined the military at 23 and had some really, of course, some pretty hard hits, both in helmets and out of helmets, through my 13-year military career. I was a breacher, so I was around explosive charges pretty often. That's why I feel for some of the guys I worked with. I remember who had more time in the military as I had, and I remember a close friend that I worked with. We were on a breaching trip, and he had like blood and black shit coming out of his nose after a day of setting charges off. I remember turning to him and just saying, "Hey, man, like that just can't be good," And we both looked at each other like, "Yeah, it feels great right now." I love that shockwave, like rattling your teeth and your head and your body. I mean, there is nothing like it in the world, but you will pay the price eventually. And so, so I had the psychological piece, if you want to call it trauma, probably starting as a child. And then, the TBI piece probably starting, I guess, also as a child and really not stopping until, I guess, probably around 2013. Yeah. And, ironically and unfortunately, my headaches now, like literally today, are just worse than ever. And I'm a little worried. They were definitely, my cognitive functioning is like off the charts, much better than they've ever been. But I'm getting really weird headaches that I've never had before. And it's kind of frightening me a little bit because I have had headaches throughout my career, I mean, I've lived on ibuprofen for so many years. I'm looking at like a new pharmaceutical to take right now that doesn't affect the stomach as much, because I'm feel like I eat those things like candy, and I just know they're not good for you. But yeah, just, again, we were talking about it recently. I think I'm going to go get some more scans, because just for the headaches. So other than that, like everything else is good, really good. But these headaches are just weird. They're happening in weird spots that like they didn't happen before, and they come on really strong. And if I don't take care of them immediately, I go into this like horrible migraine, where then I have to take like ibuprofen and like find somebody to give me a Toradol shot, and like just anything to like kill the pain. And sometimes it's from dehydration. Other times it's just from literally like smacking my head, like if I'm surfing or something, and like just like fall off on a wave, or sometimes it's just in different ways I'm putting my neck. So these are just things that didn't happen before, and so I'm a little concerned. I'm knock on wood that there's nothing too bad in there, and I'm just aging a little bit.
So I did a significant amount of head trauma, not probably as much as you, but I did martial arts when I was younger. Spent some time in shootbox in LA, which Vanderlei Silva's gym, if you remember that. So basically Fight Club, getting the shit kicked out of me for a year straight. Did stunts, firefighting. We don't really get a lot of head trauma. Ceiling falls on your head once in a while, but nothing too bad. But I've always suffered from migraines, and sleep deprivation was a huge one for me. And it's funny, when you talk to Kurt Parsley, you start to understand, head trauma and sleep deprivation pretty much mimic the same thing physiologically. But when I get them, I mean, they're 2 days long. I throw up. I have, diarrhea. I mean, it's absolutely fucking brutal, and nothing touches it. So the only thing that I've found, aside from transitioning off the fire service and getting sleep, is chiropractic. Like addressing the muscles in my neck that get super tight is somewhat of a help. But yeah, I feel your pain completely, because mine are completely debilitating. I don't know if there's that much head trauma involved, or it's more stress, deprivation, all that stuff. But if you suffer from migraines, I feel your pain, because they are absolutely awful.
Yeah, James, I'm sorry to hear that too, because like I said, I know whatever I go through, I don't wish upon anyone. So like when you tell me that, I feel horrible, because I know what they're like, and I know sometimes when you do take medicine, they still don't go away. So maybe they dampen a little bit, but they can be, when you start pulling your hair out, literally, like, I mean, it's not. So I'm sorry to hear that. I know what that's like. And, I always say that. I always also say the same thing about depression, because I think depression is so debilitating, and I don't wish that upon anyone, because sometimes you just can't, you don't know how, or you haven't been what I call cracked open from some of the medicine that we work with. You don't know how to get out of those deep ruts. And I don't wish that upon anyone either, because they're not fun places to be.
No, absolutely not. And I think sadly, they're the prices they do in business, and we can do business a lot better, because now I think we're the same. Are you 48?
I'm 45.
45. Okay, I got my math wrong then.
Yeah,
okay.
I'm not that old yet.
So we're almost the same age. So yeah, I mean, now if you look at martial arts, for example, they're not kicking the shit out of each other in gyms anymore. All the good gyms, it's less is more. It's light sparring. If you're going to fight, you fight in the ring. And the same hopefully with my community down the road. I hope we'll fix the shifts so that they get a lot more rest and recovery in between. But Kirk Parsley is one of the reasons why I started this podcast, and what he did with his community. He was working and addressing the sleep deprivation, and addressing some of the hormones and stuff. I mean, it was amazing.
Yeah, I mean, I went to Kurt many years ago when we first came out to the West Coast, and became very close with Kurt. And Kurt really, he is kind of an anchor in this whole story. We can get, I don't know, maybe we get into later, but Kurt was one of the reasons why I went and did my first psychedelic experience. Was from his recommendation, and also he was working in the background with Amber for almost a year, trying to get me to commit, but it takes a while, of course. So I have nothing but a huge place in my heart for Kurt, and just as a friend, as a brother, as a SEAL brother, and of course what he's doing for, and what he was doing initially for the community when none of what he tells me the graybeards didn't want to listen to him, and how he got out, and why he started doing the same thing for the guys, because, you know, he just cares about the guys so much, and he knew and knows what's right. And yeah.
Absolutely. All right. Well, let me kind of walk you through your career then, so we can get to the other side and start talking about that. One thing I think is fascinating with anyone that comes on the show is the amount, the level of attrition that you have in SEAL selection. I think is a model for police, is a model for fire. Now, obviously, we need more bodies probably than you guys result in, but I think setting that bar high is something that we need to see in our profession as well. So when so many people that you got hired with that went through BUD/S ended up ringing the bell, physically and mentally, what was it that carried you through and allowed you to make it through all the way to the end?
I was too dumb to quit. No, I went there with a purpose. I was going to be a SEAL. That was it. Whatever they wanted to throw at me, didn't matter. So they could have beat us every day for 6 months, and I just would have stayed there and just figured, oh, this is just a school I have to get through to get to the final place where you receive that trident and get your platoon. So for me, it was never about like, pass, fail, or can I do this? Or it was just, okay, what's the evolution? All right, great. Like we got to do that today. And some, of course, you're better than others. So for me, it was, I don't want to say it was weird. It was just the mindset I had going in was that this is just another school or thing I have to do to get to where I'm going. And so whatever they throw at me, I'm fine. It's going to be hard, but I'll never complain about, why they're doing it or whatever. But, people, individuals that go to BUD/S, they quit for, a host of reasons. You mentioned two of them. Well, it's physical and mental, really. And the physical piece, aside from, the push-ups and sit-ups and pull-ups and running and all that fun stuff, the cold water is what gets most people. I think that's what separates. That's what separates, a lot of the services and a lot of the special forces and different units. And I think it's the water. And I think it's the cold water, because nothing is more demoralizing than when you're cold and you have to get out and you stand there and you just feel like a piece of shit, and you're shaking, and they say you got to go back in. It's usually when they say you got to go back in. It's not like when you're in, even though people do quit. People quit. The majority of individuals that quit BUD/S are, it turns back into psychological. So it's like the morning, you wake up in the morning. First off, people ask me what's the hardest part of BUD/S. I tell them waking up in the morning, because you wake up and you literally can't fucking move. And, in 30 minutes, you're literally going to be on the grinder, getting your ass beat again and sprinting, 400 yards in and out of the ocean, getting sandy, coming back and doing it in 2 minutes. And that, just the thought of that, when you can't move and you're kind of warm under your covers, and it's California when the sun's not out, a coastal desert environment. So it could be, 48, even mid 50s is cold when the water is going to be somewhere in the low 60s, mid 60s, or if you're really unlucky, here in the mid 50s. But anyway, I never really thought about quitting. I had like a moment of weakness. I think Wednesday night of Hell Week, I remember like breaking down and just going like, what am I doing? Like, it was one of those things where my mind was just started wandering. I probably was hallucinating. But yeah, for me, quitting was never an option.
How much did G.I. Joe prepare you for that process? Excuse me, G.I. Jane, not or G.I. Joe either.
Like probably zero. Right. It was a great movie. Nothing. There's nothing there that is even. I guess there's there's some similarities, but there's, still at the end of the day, I don't care. It's like it's like stuff that's in theory and then in practical work, right? So I don't care how many books you read, like you still can't go out on a range and shoot a long gun just by, being an expert at reading every manual that there is and on this specific weapon system. And so like you actually have to do the work. And so whatever you watch, that's why it still hasn't gotten easier, because there's so much information out there. They could watch whatever they want. They could hear all these podcasts about all the cool guys, some of them that have done really cool things, and they could hear about every hour and every minute of buds. But like, how is that going to help a person when, there's a war fighter that just spent the last 20 years on his like 25th combat deployment kicking sand in your face? Like, I don't care what you watch or what you read or what you think, you're going to get your ass beat, and depends on what's going on up here is going to keep you going.
Yeah. Backdraft didn't prepare me too well for Fire Academy either.
I thought I could be a firefighter after backdraft. I was like, I carry this, I wear this gear, if something falls, I move out of the way. The door thing, right? Like, oh shit, there's smoke. If I open it, backdraft, and so I'm not supposed to do that. I'm sure that's exactly how they teach it at DK.
It is, and then you just have to suspect the chief is an arsonist, and then you're pretty much going to get through it.
That's good. Yeah.
All right, well then, I know you have an interesting kind of career as well, because you entered pre 9/11. 9/11 happened like right when you were going through all this. So talk to me about that journey and when you found yourself finally overseas.
Yeah, so it was pre 9/11. It's there was no war, and so when I got into the teams, it was, well, actually I wasn't in the teams. I was in Buds. We just thought we were running on the beach and we're getting strong and we're going to go to our platoon and we're going to do all this quote unquote cool shit and jump out of planes, and then the couple idiots decided to fly 2 aircraft into the World Trade Center, and a couple others decided to fly into the Pentagon, and one got downed into a field in, I don't know if it was in Virginia. Anyway, we got to watch about a minute of that. I was in third phase. We were actually doing PT. We were doing push-ups and pull-ups and sit-ups, and instructors came out and said, hey, somebody just flew a plane into the World Trade Center. And I remember us all started bitching and complaining that we were in third phase about to graduate from 6 months of Buds, and why are they still messing with us? Like, we thought this was one of those psychological, shit storms that they were trying to.
It's part of Buds.
Whatever, it's called Buds. So they actually followed us into the living quarters where they stayed. Of course, we stayed. We slept outside, literally. And we get followed into this big screen TV, and the towers are, they're on fire and coming down. And we were like, holy shit, like what's happening? So we didn't really understand it at the time as students. Like, we were still just like gung ho and just, this is cool. But the instructors, their whole demeanor changed. Like, they knew, like, they'd been in the teams for 10 years, 15, 20, depending on what leadership level they were at. And it was, for them, they knew, like, we're about to go to war. And I remember it. Like, I couldn't believe the whole shift, that paradigm shift, you want to call it, from instructors being a certain way to like this really like hardened, and everything they talked about after that was about, if you did something wrong, well, how are you going to perform in combat? You know what I mean? It started going back to like, everything was now combat focused versus this one time, when I was at Buds, or this one time on this training trip, or this one time when we did this. Everything started focused to like, you screw something up, like how are you gonna perform in combat? Like that's what the kind of whole shift in demeanor went to, and it was real. It got very real after that.
So a question that I like to ask anyone who's actually been deployed, who's seen combat, and the reason behind this is, we get a very polarized view. And I say we, civilians, obviously I'm a fireman, I'm not a member of the military, a very polarizing view of war. Either the one extreme is they're all a bunch of baby killers, and then the other side is, kill them all, let God sort them out, CNN versus Fox, basically. And then in the middle ground are the men and women, barely, children that we send over in uniforms to, go fight for our country with an American flag or British flag or Australian flag on their shoulder. So those are the stories that I want to bring, almost like Sebastian Junger's town hall that he talks about. So when you were over there, regardless of the politics, obviously you had a very real reaction because, you witnessed the towers falling as you were going through training. But were there any kind of things that you witnessed overseas, whether Iraq or Afghanistan, where you realized, okay, regardless of what sent me here, now I'm seeing with my own eyes some horrible people that we need to take care of?
So my mission on every deployment was going after high value targets for the most part. And so, we mostly saw kind of the worst of the worst over there. And yeah, of course there's terrible things that happen in war, like horrible things. And we've all seen them. We all hear about them. And that stuff definitely does happen. But what we were doing is exactly what we wanted to do. I went to Buds and went through, my platoons and then selection after that, to go chase down, bad guys that were taking out, our soldiers, during the daytime hours on the street and, taking off arms and legs and everything else. And so, we felt we were doing a righteous thing. We were fighting terrorists and we were fighting really bad people, that wouldn't even think twice about killing you or your family or, your wife and kids. And, we're talking about civilian people that they wouldn't even blink an eye to, where, that's the opposite of the American way, of the U.S., individual, the U.S. soldier. We're doing everything in our power to protect civilians and take out, the enemy. Unfortunately, things happen, but, these are not good people. And, we enjoyed every minute of taking the fight to the enemy, if you want to call it that, without a doubt. And more of that happened than any of the bad stuff you hear about. 100%. There are bits and pieces of things that have happened that, may not sit well, or, stories you hear about, but you don't hear about like the 1,000 other stories that are good, similar to, what we're hearing now about, law enforcement. Law enforcement's getting their ass kicked by the public. But there's always bad apple here and there. And, they don't like to talk about all the good things that law enforcement does for us. And so, yeah, I don't know what you're looking for here, but I enjoyed every minute of going overseas and fighting alongside some of the best individuals that I had the privilege to work with.
Yeah, no, that's exactly what I'm looking for, just your perspective. Now, the other side of the coin is kindness and compassion. So again, we get this vision of war being a terrible place. We get it painted again with the left and the right that we are at war with Iraq, with Afghanistan. And the reality is, no, there are some extremists in those countries that are terrorizing and murdering their own people. And that's who our military are hunting down. And amidst that seems to be all these amazing stories of kindness and compassion that our members of the military witness, either within their own, men and women, or with the people that they're embedded with. So were there any moments of kindness and compassion that kind of resonated, that really stuck with you in the time that you were overseas?
I hope what I'm about to say gets out, like, to everyone who thinks that we're a bunch of, whatever you want to call them, warmongers or baby killers. When I used to go out at night on an operation, not just me, like my whole unit, we literally took time to put chem lights in our pockets, like the ones that you crack and you can see at night, like red and blue and green. I took extra water. I took candy. Anything that you can think of that wasn't like obviously like weighing you down, but all these like little things that when we did get on a target and there were a bunch of women and children, I could crack chem lights and give them to the kids to play with. I could hand out candy to them. I'd hand out water during the day because it was so hot over there. And of course we got as much as we needed. And who knows, when you see what these people live in, it's heartbreaking. We have it so good over here. My daughter was just telling me today, we walked up to get a cup of coffee right before this, iced coffee, by the way, almond milk. It's just how good we have it here in the US when you see, some of these other places. And like, we didn't have to do that. And it wasn't just one person. It wasn't just me. It was like everybody was taking chem lights out on target. Everybody was taking candy. I was handing out water when I was in a turret because I was up there and it was just easy to like hand to people. We did that all the time. I don't think I've ever heard that once mentioned on a news story or written anywhere. But, here we are about to go after like a high value target. And we're at the same time worried about making sure, we have enough chem lights for the kids, or there's some extra water if we need to hand it out. And you're never going to hear that. I mean, if you, there's a friend of mine that I went through a selection with, he was killed in combat, Adam Brown. There was a book written called Fearless, amazing book, amazing individual. He was actually my roommate, BR Brown and Capone CA. And so there you go.
I got the book. There you go. Amazing book.
Yeah. And I mean, you know the story then, right? When he went over to Afghanistan, I don't know, it was the first time. I'm going to chop this up. So everyone listening, I apologize, but I'm going to get most of it right. He noticed that there were just tons of kids over there without shoes. And he figured out a way to have, I don't know how many hundreds of shoes sent over. So I probably butchered the number, but that's basically what happened. He saw children in Afghanistan who didn't have shoes in villages, in villages that may have been, I don't know if you want to call them good, bad, maybe they're harboring an individual, maybe a terrorist was there. I don't know. But he took it upon himself to somehow reach back to the States and have a bunch of shoes sent over for these individuals. And shit like that happens all the time. I wish we could hear about it more, because really, everybody I know that has gone over there is trying to seek out the enemy and trying to limit damage to civilian population, like on the highest level.
Yeah, well, thank you for sharing that. And that's exactly that. It's the human experience. You wore a uniform, I wore a uniform, but we were kids. We were in kindergarten once, and then you became a SEAL, and I became a firefighter, and then we transitioned out. And I think that's the problem with some of our men and women when they do transition, is the struggle with identity, especially when they come back home. You then, have someone who has that baby killer thing, or the opposite, like, oh yeah, you stacking bodies over there and patting you on the shoulder. And it's like, no, these are human beings that at times, had to get in a flow state and do what you were paid to do. And other times showed, moments of incredible kindness and compassion. And that's the vision, that's the storytelling from our military that we do need to hear.
Yeah. And I'm telling you right now, that's 90-something% of the individuals, right? Like I said, there's always bad apples, but no, I mean, the majority of individuals I work with were literally, they're best people you could ever imagine that you'd ever want to work with, both intellectually, physically, all of it.
So you're already in this, very small percentage of members of the Navy. But then there's obviously another very infamous tier 1 group within the SEAL community. What made you decide to test for them? And then, what position did you end up holding in that organization?
Yeah. So, the funny thing is, I guess now, is it 10 years maybe? We didn't really talk much about SEAL Team 6, but it is now a public knowledge, and most individuals that are in special operations, at least I didn't know that there was I didn't even know what a tier 1 unit was. But when I found out about a tier 1 unit, I just immediately said, okay, I want to do that. I didn't know that these guys do, they do, other things that are, different, more focused on certain areas of operating. And, it's a whole nother selection. And so you go through just as much, I don't want to say it's not like buds, where buds are trying to test your physical and mental fortitude. This is more on skill set and how well you react to certain situations and how quick you can think. And you definitely I say use your brain for all special operations, but they were testing you more on how well you can react to high stress situations and make good decisions immediately. Not bad decisions, like a decision. I know there's an old, a decision is better than none. I may argue that one. But they want to see you make good decisions in high stress situations. So that's another 6-month selection process that you're running and gunning, shooting, jumping. You get graded on everything that you do. And, at the end of 6 months, you're standing with about 40 individuals that, have proven their worth, and you move on to different things.
All right. Well, we won't explore that too deeply, but obviously, again, I just want to paint the picture that you were at that level. I know you were breaching. You were a breacher within the organization as well. As you progress through your career, before we get to the transition out, had you and/or Amber already seen signs of behavioral change, whether it's initially thought as PTS or something else?
Yeah, that's a good question. So each deployment I came back, each combat deployment really after 9/11, I came back, it was just different, and for me, it was just normal because I was just morphing right into whatever I ended up. But, for Amber and the kids, they obviously can see that change pretty radically, especially when you're gone for months at a time. You come back a new individual. And so every time one of our guys come home, or girls, you change. And for some, they're doing that for over 20 years, some at 30, some at 40. But 20 years of sustained combat, that's a lot. Our nation's never experienced that. And I think there's a breaking point, and there's still people out there that will tell you that there's nothing wrong with them. And I think everyone's been affected in one way or the other. I envy the individuals, and I've said this before, I envy the individuals that can keep going. We're all tuned differently. Some can do 30, and I hope they're fine. They're okay. There's others that, they see one friend get killed in action, and they're suffering for life, and so we're all different. I don't want to judge. I think everybody's story should be heard. I think we should learn from them. But, after 20 years of sustained combat, there's a lot of work to be done post-military career. And, I'm still working on it. And, that change, like I said, if you started at 9/11 and you're getting out now, it's 21 years of change. So you're definitely a different human being from September 11, 01.
Well, I mean, it's impossible not to change. If I think of, my career, it was only 14 years as a firefighter, but, saw and did a lot of things that, even though when I look back, I was just so fortunate, so lucky. There's no other way to put it, lucky to have the upbringing that I had. I had some childhood trauma, but even that, the way my childhood was, there was almost like an ingrained ability to process that when I was young. So it's there, but it's not something that's debilitating. But there's no way in hell James Gearing can be the same at 27 when I entered the fire service as I am now, because of all the things I've seen, all the things I've had to do getting up, I mean, all these tragedy, all these heartbroken families that we're exposed to, all the inability to save a life. I mean, these all weigh up. So you're going to be different, but there's a difference between that through line of you just, being 20 years older, wiser, and, more skeptical. But there's another thing with, the side effects of other things, PTS and trauma. But I think when you talk about some people that are able to progress more, from all these conversations, it seems like, again, a common denominator is, what did their life look like before they put the uniform on? Because if you had a lot of shit that was never, ever addressed, and then you became a cop, a firefighter, or a SEAL, your foundation is a lot more vulnerable than someone like myself, who was just fucking lucky to not be beaten by their father when they were 4. I mean, I got smacked, but with a belt and stuff, and never maliciously, and never, with a closed fist. And so I think that's a big part too. I think, some people are, because probably when you look at their earlier life, it kind of set them up for success. And I think a lot of people that I see that end up with a gun in their hand, or in their mouth, when you reverse engineer, there's a lot of things that happen before they ever put a uniform on.
I agree. You're spot on with that. We never ever call out anyone, but we're learning that a lot of childhood trauma is what is the makeup of a lot of our special operations units, for whatever reason. And so now we have that childhood trauma, and maybe you have some brain trauma from contact sports or whatever. And then you go in the military and you have, you shoot a ton of guns and you're around a lot of explosives, and then you go to war and you see a bunch of shit that most people don't have, like you've seen. And you then transition out of the military, and it's like a tornado. It's like a recipe, it's a recipe that, one day it's going to stop. Like, it's just, you go, okay, you're done. And you start thinking back about all these different things that have happened, and it upsets you, and you go, man, I need a drink. Cause that's just like, I just thought about, John Doe, or I just thought about this incident. And then, that drink puts you in a state of even, worse depression, and you start thinking about it more, and, you're seeing the spiral now. Right. And then it just spirals out of control, because you're numbing from, an incident that has happened. But like you said, maybe, all that stuff you took on as a child, and then it just gradually progressed. It's a recipe for, for big explosion at some point.
So transition is definitely, again, where a lot of people struggle. Like I said, whether it's the identity, the lack of purpose, that we had while we were in the uniform, the lack of tribe. You leave that group of men that you were serving with for so long. So talk to me about what, when you got to the point where you did transition out, and then what was that transition like for you?
I was super excited to transition. Like, when I finally realized, like, I'm doing something different than before. It was like, okay, I'm starting a new journey here. I guess that'll be okay. And it was such a struggle. It was. I didn't have the tribe. You mentioned Sebastian.
Sebastian Junger.
Yeah. You didn't have the tribe. You didn't have your community. You didn't have people to lean on. Life was different. And at that point, you slow down a little bit. My time in the teams were very physical too. So I was, always, running, jumping, fighting, very, very physical. And, you jump in the private sector, if you put on a shirt and tie, you're, it's a very more cerebral life. And so, you do have time to think about a lot of these different things, and a lot of these things begin to frustrate you, and you don't have the outs that you had, when you were in the military. And so, again, these all add up to causing you more stress than probably maybe you even have. And you don't know how to deal with that stress. And, it's so weird. I look back at my time in the military. Like, I never remember being like anxious, depressed, upset, but, upset, of course, around individuals that we lost. But the bounce back with that was like immediate. It was like celebrate their life, move on, boom, go. Mission driven. Like we have work to do. This is what it's supposed to be. Like we expect to lose individuals in times of combat, and so or see something bad. But once that stops, and you do have time to reflect, at least what we're seeing, and I'm sure you've seen, that's when it starts to creep up on you. And then again, we could always go back to individuals that have, serious head trauma or even mild head trauma. The subconcussive blows are, really affecting the day-to-day living for a lot of individuals, and not everybody's the same. So, one big boom could affect somebody, 1,000 little booms may affect somebody, and then you have everybody in between. And some affect more than others. So we can't judge. We can't say that, well, that guy had, 4 grenades go off and he was in 8 IEDs and he's okay. Because this other guy, hit his head on something. But like, we can't judge that. I don't know how your I don't know your brain makeup is. I don't know how hard your skull is. Like, I don't know. That's not for me to judge. And so everybody deals with it in their own way, and we just got to take care of everyone individually.
In the fire service, I've been at wrecks where we've pulled on scene. There's one, someone just abandoned their car on a freeway in the middle of the night, and in California, actually, is when I was with Anaheim. And this poor couple barreled into this parked car in the dark at probably 70, 80 miles an hour. We pull on scene and we're like, shit, I mean, these people have got to be dead. And we pull up and these 2 people walk from the side of the road, and they're like, not only were they fine, they didn't even want to go anywhere to be checked out. They were like, no, we're totally fine. We're like, Jesus Christ. And then I can think of a 4-way stop sign where someone was drunk and blew through and hit this woman. Didn't seem to be that bad a damage in the car, and she was dead inside. So another example of, you never know if a trauma is going to, give you a bruise or cause a, aortic aneurysm and you bleed out in 10 seconds. So, I think that's the thing with trauma. We're all different. And obviously with the mental health side, we're all different. Some of us, getting a dog works amazingly. Some people need Ibogaine.
Yeah, some do need Ibogaine.
So let's get to that then. So you transition out. I can see how jarring working in finance would be, because I talk about this quite a bit. There's a sense of kindness and compassion that draws us into military, police, fire. We want to help, we want to protect. And I think with that childhood trauma element, you want to be a protector. You were victimized as a child. You want the buck to stop here. You want to, be the person that protects other people from predators. Then you transition out, and that purpose isn't there as a real estate agent, as a financier. And so, I think that's when all that stuff comes back. You haven't got adrenaline anymore either. You haven't got that, excitement that the job brought to you. So when did you or Amber realize, you were really spiraling downwards? Where was that bottom for you? And then walk me through your journey into psychedelics.
Yeah, I mean, the spiral really started in 2010 when I left really operational duty and we moved to the West Coast, became an instructor. And what I thought life was going to be good, it just started really declining at that moment. I think part of it was because I wasn't operational. I was away from my guys I had worked with for a number of years, and probably the busiest time of the war, from let's say 06 to 2010, or 06 to 2010. And so, it really started there. I was put on my first antidepressant in 2010 while on active duty. And when I was medically retired in 2013, it just, that effect kind of just kept trickling. And, I kept fighting it. I just kept, thinking, there's nothing here. I could work through this. But from outsiders looking in now, and I talk to individuals, of course, that I know, and including Amber and the kids, yeah, it was horrible for them. It was like, and I would say, so I was separated. So it was like 2013. I was out, and slowly got worse with just heavier drinking, more numbing, coping with life that I just didn't think was really meaningful at the time. Amber had started looking into some brain clinics. There was some money available, and we spent a lot of money out of pocket, just trying to figure out like if there's anything wrong with my head. And we did. And we found there was some scarring. I was able to go, luckily enough, to Amen Clinic, which was they do SPECT scans, and it showed some areas of the brain where I didn't have blood flow that were, supposed to be working. And there were also some markers for, PTSD and depression, and I think I want to say bipolar 2, which I don't like to say because it's a very misdiagnosed thing. So there's a therapist that still argues that. So I'm going to side with her because she knew me really well. And so, just had all these things that were showing up and happening, and I was getting angrier, and I was getting really frustrated at the system. I was just like trusting the system, the Western medicine approach of like, here's, you have medical insurance, and so here's the drugs that you need because you have PTSD. That's what the military told me. Major depressive disorder, MDD, alcohol abuse disorder, in a host of other things. And so you get these cocktails of antidepressants, SSRIs, and some anti-anxiety medication, some medicines that help you avoid nightmares, and then medicines that help you think clearer or focus more. So things like Adderall, and there's these two others that I was put on. I forgot the name of them, but they used to give me really bad headaches. Anyway. And then also, of course, Ambien to sleep, and then tried a few others because, I was concerned about Ambien. I said, hey, I used Ambien for many years while on active duty. And I know Ambien is not good for you. Dr. Kirk Parsley will tell you all about that. And this is just not the way to live, James. And I was at a point where I thought Amber and the kids would be better off without me here, because I felt like I was this burden of, everything was for dad, everything we had to do was around what I needed. I'm not in a good mood. Everyone had to walk on eggshells, and I was, snapping at everything. I was angry. I was throwing things through our windows at the house, and then completely reckless. It came to a point where I couldn't care less if you were law enforcement, or it just didn't matter. Like, I just didn't care. I was like, what matters? Like, what I used to do in the past mattered. I had purpose there. I was with a group of people who had purpose, and we were all fighting for the same thing. And now it's like, what is this private sector life? It's bullshit. Everyone's selling some widget or some service that may be good, maybe not. Most of the times it was honestly bullshit. Individuals were bullshit. And so that was tough to, that was also, part of the issue. And to a little of my knowledge, Amber and Kirk Parsley were working in the background for about a year to get me to go do this, what I thought at the time was pretty insane, crazy sounding. I don't call it experimental, because I don't think you could experiment on stuff for thousands of years. It was highly proven. We just didn't do enough, double-blind, placebo clinical trials at academic institutions, peer-reviewed, and we had to make sure that they were done correctly and spend probably about $1 billion once you get to like phase 3, or at least 100 million, 150 million and up, which are phase 3 trials. And so if it didn't do that, then these don't matter. And I just committed. There was a point, it was finally at a point where I couldn't take it anymore. Amber and the kids couldn't take it anymore. We weren't going to stay together. Like we were ready to part ways. Like we had to. It was not, at that point it was Amber had to do more for the kids. Like she had to take care of the kids. Like they were all living with an individual that really wasn't a husband, a dad. It was just a pain in the ass. And, I said, you know what, I've done enough research on this now. And I understand that these medicines were initially intended for, psychospiritual growth, for a host of things wrong with the body, both mind and body, and spiritual too, right? So these medicines have been used for thousands of years for spiritual connection. And I kind of took a leap of faith. I always joke that I'm a guinea pig. I'll do anything if you tell me it's going to make me, bigger, faster, stronger, smarter, better. Yeah, sign me up. I'll try, as a friend of mine says, I'll try anything twice. It's his line though, not mine. And I went out of the country to do a psychedelic medicine called Ibogaine, which is synthesized from, I don't know if that's the right term, but it's an alkaloid of the Iboga plant. I believe Iboga gets to about 10 feet, and they have they have big, bush leaves and these fruits that grow off the leaves, but at the base of it is the root, and they take the outside of the root bark off, and then they shave down the root itself, or like the wood part of it, and that's called Iboga. And I believe there's 13 alkaloids. The one most prevalent in there is Ibogaine, and Ibogaine is what is really, I believe, exploding right now in popularity because of its anti-addictive properties. Nothing comes close to anything for an opioid heroin addict. It completely scrubs the receptors, and the efficacy rates are through the roof. But pharma doesn't want to hear that somebody has to take something once or twice without any withdrawal symptoms. So, Ibogaine and Ibogaine are just like a unbelievably healing and curing. I'll say curing. I don't know. I suppose you're not supposed to use that term. Medicine. And that's just for addiction. And for trauma, we've been doing this now for 5 years. I haven't heard anything that there are psychedelic medicines that are really powerful and really working. Things like ayahuasca and psilocybin, DMT, and others that are fantastic. And of course, MDMA, which will be federally legalized first for PTSD. These drugs are great and they're working really well. But if you want the nuclear option, you go to Ibogaine or Iboga. It's not a fun journey. It's going to kick your ass, but you're going to come out the other side whole again and reset, and with a new kind of, for many, life purpose and mission. And so that's what happened to me. I committed to the medicine. It's about a 12-hour, really tough experience where it's almost like it's like a movie of your life right in front of your eyes, and the medicine knows how to work. Even though you go in there with certain intentions, if you're hiding some of those intentions, or you have other things that are causing blockages in your life, Ibogaine's going to go find those, and you're going to face those demons during your journey. And as you can imagine, opening up those floodgates can be really difficult and traumatic for people. But as we all know, the only way to fight fear is through. And you you have to face those fears in order to grow. And so, if you had some of those childhood traumas that are affecting you later in your life, you got to go back and face those childhood traumas again. That's what therapists pull out of you. That's what you're supposed to get to when you're doing talk therapy or, some of the other treatments that you do with therapists. But it could take years. Psychedelics done correctly could potentially take, days, weeks, months, but they happen pretty quickly. I mean, it's like a time machine to get better.
Well, it's amazing to hear, and I've had so many people on the show that I think have gone through you. So we've got Jeff Nichols, Dan Cirillo, Nick Norris, Johnny Walker. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. So people can hear these testimonies of, these elite operators that, initially thought they were bulletproof and superheroes, and then, that reconnected with their humanity and then struggled, used alcohol, used opiates, and then found Ibogaine, and it's just absolutely amazing to hear it. Now I want to circle around to something you said quickly, because this is again a kind of revelation I had earlier on. When people talk about suicide, there's always this conversation of cowardice. How could they? How could they leave their family behind? What a coward. You talked about being a burden. That's the huge kind of perspective that lends into the broken mind, is just that. So many of these men and women get to the point where they feel like they're a burden. So the selfless thing, even though it makes no sense to a healthy mind, to their mind at that moment in time, the selfless thing is to remove yourself from your family because you feel like such a burden. You feel like you're ruining their life. So was that what you were feeling at that moment?
I mean, 100%. I mean, I wasn't thinking about me. I mean, I was thinking about me, that I had nothing to really live for, but I was really thinking about Amber and the kids, just going, well, if I remove myself from this situation, then they don't have to deal with me anymore, which is causing them to be stuck in their mind, body, and life. And so if I remove myself, then they can flourish. Amber can find somebody that, would be, a better husband to her, and then the kids could not have this father that was just judgmental and just not, not that I was ever like bad to the kids, but I was still like not present. I still didn't have a relationship. And I thought, well, if I'm not here, then all these great things can happen for them. And yeah, maybe I'll be missed, maybe not, but they'll go on and live this like fruitful life. And that's kind of the way I was rationalizing it. And, God forbid I run into somebody that ever says someone who takes their life is cowardice. And I remember individuals that I worked with, I remember you would hear that. And I would agree with that, just because like, what do you call it when it's a group think? Is that what it is? Group think when?
Yeah.
Oh. When, yeah. Oh yeah. But you're not even understanding or really thinking about what they're saying. You're just in this group and everyone's kind of agreeing. But no, it's the opposite. I mean, these individuals who take their lives are some of the toughest people on the planet. There's real shit going on. You're not thinking clearly. It's not rational thinking. Or maybe if it is rational thinking, they're doing it to what they think in their mind may make it easier for others, right? If they're not here. It is not cowardice. It just is. And unfortunately, they feel that the system may have shorted them. They may not feel like they're getting the help they need, or they are in so much pain, either physically and or mentally, that they just can't take it anymore. And I don't know how that is cowardice. Because I know some really good people that took their lives, and I would consider them the most like hardened warriors that I've ever worked with. So it saddens me when And most of those individuals who say it are just, they don't get it, or they're just not experiencing it. And I understand the part that they're not experiencing it. I know plenty of guys who say, well, I don't understand this PTSD thing. I don't have any. Well, my next question, and I usually I don't say anything, but, it's, how much did you actually do? How many times have you stuck your face in front of a door? How many times have you been on the receiving end of gunfire? How many friends did you bury? I could go on and on and on. And, again, I envy those folks. You're a lot tougher than I am.
Well, I would ask him, how much do you drink at night? You know what I mean? That's probably a real look in the mirror. If you say you're good, but then you have to dive into the bottle every evening, you're probably not good.
Yeah, you're probably not. And I am finding out that there are more and more individuals that do need help. They just even haven't asked for it yet, or just haven't come to the grips that there's something wrong there. And you know what? It's okay to raise your hand and say, hey man, I need a timeout, or I need a tune up. Because it's okay when your shoulder's blown out to go see every specialist in the world to get you back, firefighting on the front lines, going after terrorists. You'll go see the best doctors. They'll cut you open. They'll tie you up. You'll do rehab forever. And everyone would just say, oh yeah, he's just getting his shoulder worked on. He's going to be back. He's going to be fine. But you raise your hand and say, you know what? There's something going on between my ears. Like there's just something not right. Like I'm getting headaches, or I'm forgetting stuff, or I'm really angry, or I'm depressed. Now you're cuckoo. You're damaged. And all you want to do maybe is go get a tune up, go get your head worked on. Maybe go get some imaging done, maybe talk to some folks. Maybe, you just need to go to someone who understands your brain and help you fix it. And then maybe you can get back to where you need to go. Maybe it's back in the fight. Maybe it's doing something totally different. Maybe it's just trying to be a normal, human being, a dad, husband, wife, or whatever. So, that's what I'm trying to do. I think that's what we're trying to do, is break this stigma of just asking for some help, a little bit of empathy. Maybe if you're not here yet, but understand that you're still the same person. You're just going through some stuff and you'd like to work on it. I don't think that's bad.
Absolutely not. Well, I think that's why the messaging needs to be, you hear people say, oh, think about your family. We'll say that to someone who thinks that they're a burden to their family. You just kind of, put the final nail in the coffin. So I think we need to get people to realize, if you feel like a burden, if you're having that self-talk that the world would be better off without you, then that's the red flag. If your family see that from the outside, that's the red flag that we need to go. Because there was no more heartbreaking story than we had in Florida about 2 months ago, where we had a male police officer take his own life. And then I think it was a week later, his girlfriend took her own life, and they had a brand new baby with no parents. And people were like, well, how could they do that? Exactly, because you're thinking with a normal, healthy brain and trying to get inside the head of someone who was in crisis. And it just doesn't, you can't think that way. So the moment that makes sense, that removing yourself from this world will make it better, when actually the reality is the complete opposite. The moment you have those thoughts, that's exactly where you need to put your hand, if not before, put your hand up and say, I need help. This is in a really bad place now.
And I know plenty of people that have done it. I know plenty of people that have checked themselves into facilities, or at least called a friend, or just something to say, hey, I'm not right, or have given their guns away, just all the above. And most of those individuals are doing really, really well now. Right. So they needed, you talked to all of them on your show, all the individuals you mentioned. I won't say anything they didn't, but I'm sure they said the same thing. They were at their lows, and they searched for answers, and they found them. And now they're freaking, all those guys are killing it. Like, they're all doing so well. It's like, it's incredible. It's really incredible how well they're doing. And I'm super pumped to know that this is just another thing that we need to take care of. We're really good. I joke, I've said this a million times. We're really good at taking protein and creatine and, NO2 and all these other things that you put in your body to like work out and run faster and lift more weights. But we forget to do the stuff for our brains that really operate everything. It is the platform that operates everything else. And so, we do need to take time to do nothing, meditate, take supplements that help, just feed it what it needs in order to work better or maintain.
Absolutely. Well, so the project I'm doing with Ryan, the Human Performance Project and the 7X, that was inspired tragically by the loss of Ryan's sniper partner, David Metcalf. I'm going to get Jamie on the show to tell his story too. Another person who's been on the show is Sarah Wilkinson, who lost Chad. Obviously another resounding element, as we touched on earlier, was TBI. So, I think Jeff Nichols is someone who talks about that as well. So you went through all this, as you said, it was identified as PTSD. Talk to me about the TBI element, how you're finding, Ibogaine and some other psychedelics as treatment, and how that's being misdiagnosed sometimes as purely PTSD.
Yeah. So, just the people you just mentioned, David Metcalf, we went to Buds together. We were in the class 236. And I think, I don't want to butcher this, he was either the honorman or the fire in the gut. Anyway, he was a stud. He was a pure stud, and not a cowardice. If anybody wants to speak out about that, I mean, that guy was amazing. And then, Chad, I worked with Chad, over at the squadron, and another guy who's just a phenomenal performer and individual, and you would never see it coming. But, his wife, Sarah, who, sits on our, board of directors at Vets, it was the reason we really came out public to tell this story and to talk about psychedelic medicine, because we were sitting at his funeral in Virginia Beach, and Amber was just looking around and I was looking around, and she, it was just, we just said, man, is this what we're going to do now the next 20 years? Is that we've been in this funeral home, I don't even know how many times, for individuals killed in action. And now we're going to be in here for individuals that are death by suicide. Like we can't keep our mouths shut anymore. And we felt bad, because we also felt that maybe if we spoke out a little bit earlier, maybe there would have been some hope there, or something that we could have done to prevent this, tragic incident. And so we just said, okay, we're going to make a deal where we're going to speak out about this. I don't care if I'm never offered a normal job again because somebody thinks it's weird. So I kind of looked at it as, I think this is the right thing to do. I don't care who doesn't believe in what we're speaking about, but if they can't wrap their heads around what we're doing is for the benefit of others, then they need to go get their head checked out. And so, just going back to, you spoke about Dave, you spoke about Chad, you spoke about Sarah, they were a big part of where we are today and why we're doing this. I miss those two dearly. But David had serious, he had TBI, he had traumatic brain injury, and it was causing, all the shit that you hear about. And, that operator syndrome came out a number of years ago and talked about how, they talked about special operations individuals in there just for the amount of, gunfire and explosive work. And there's, and that the majority of special operations veterans are around those type of things more than conventional soldiers. Although conventional soldiers, of course, do, a host of other things that special operations guys don't do. So I don't want to get into like who's worse off, but that study initially was on special operations veterans and the amount of subconcussive and concussive blows that individuals are around, and it's causing these micro tears in the brain, and the micro tears are causing like just imbalance in our bodies that are causing us the inability to sleep. Our hormones are out of whack. I mean, I have friends that like come back at 35 years old with their testosterone levels under 300. I'm sure the same in your world, James, but like, this is not normal. Right. And low testosterone like that causes an individual to be depressed or angry, and vice versa. And you have all these comorbid, diagnoses that, how does a doctor even know what to prescribe? Right. So what they know is like, oh, you're angry, you're depressed, you have anxiety when you're in crowds. Well, you have PTSD. So we're going to give you this brown bag full of all these prescription medicines for PTSD. Oh, and by the way, we're not going to look inside your brain yet. We're just going to give you all these medicines. Why would we take a photo of what's happening inside before we just start treating it like you do to every other part of your body? Right. And so there's an overlap between, I call it MTBI, or traumatic brain injury, and post-traumatic stress, and all the host of other diagnoses that come along with it. And so, the research, it's getting stronger. I mean, I know there's good work going on, but it's very difficult to deal with. Again, when you really don't know what you're dealing with, you're like, is this a brain thing? Is this a psychological thing? Is this childhood trauma? Is this wartime trauma? Is it a traumatic brain injury? I don't know. Is it low testosterone? I think we got a lot more work to do trying to figure out how to treat the whole human, right? This kind of integrative medicine or holistic health, whatever you want to call it. That's how we need to be approaching this effort, is from a, mind, body, spirit, preventative care. And for us that are a bit damaged, then, we need to, we need to fix things, but we could also work on things prior to them happening.
Absolutely. And like you said, it's usually, all those elements is going to be a combination of everything, perfect storm of all those things. And sadly, as you touched on, I think at the beginning, or maybe I was thinking another conversation, the real test for this kind of damage has to be done post-mortem. So you can't just pull out the brain and look at it and then pop it back in someone when they're still alive. So I think that's another tragic, barrier to progressing in that medicine. So I think just has to be the assumption, whether you're in law enforcement. I've had people on here that taught breaching. So they were there breach after breach after breach, getting this concussion over and over again. Well, it's the same with our cancer presumption and some of the other things in the fire service. You are awake 24 hours a day, every third day. There's your presumption. You don't need to show me, oh, there's this cancer came from that car fire back in 1997. No, you were up every fucking third day. There's your prevention. It's the same with this. If you were exposed to concussion, then, there just needs to be an assumption. You did this for our country. You come home. We're going to take care of you now. Yep.
Which some will argue we do a good or we don't do a good job doing.
But there's room for improvement.
There's always room for improvement. I think if you think you stop, or it's time to stop improving, it's time to figure out to do something else at that point. But we could always improve forever. I mean, shit, my dad improved to the day he died of pancreatic cancer. He probably lived the best years of his life the last 2 or 3 years, just because he was in such a good state of mind, and just learned that, the way he was prior to that was not cool. So he learned, and I think it gave him a couple extra years.
Was it the diagnosis that was the pivot in that?
Yeah, I think it was the diagnosis, and it was a diagnosis, and they gave him 3 months to live. And it was the fact that Amber called him every single day and talked about spirituality and just life. And he really just kind of sprouted after that. what was 70 years old. So, but I said it earlier. I don't think, at least for veterans, the VA and those that are covered under TRICARE, other insurance, at the individual level, I think everybody cares and everybody's trying, but that's not good enough. We need to figure something out. It's really, even individuals who have all the money in the world, they seem to have a hard time finding where to find the right specialists, the right treatments. I've heard about stuff years after I left the military, like, oh, you didn't know about this program? No, I didn't. I didn't at all. Like, why didn't I know? Like, I was medically retired. Like, I went through a bunch of shit because I was having some issues, and like, I think I should know about that specific program that takes individuals that have, things going on with their head. And some of these programs are there, but they're just, you don't know about them, or maybe they're not put together well. I don't know. But I do think the private sector needs to step in a little bit, if they're able to augment, or take over some of the public facing, treatments and healthcare protocols and other things that we could do.
Well, I want to get to the creation of vets, because obviously, like so many people on the show, as I mentioned, whether they're military, police, fire, have come out of that profession and then found other ways to give. I mean, Ryan, the Sons of the Flag and Bird's Eye Project's perfect example. But talk to me about, so you had this Ibogaine journey, this experience. What was the other side like for you? And then as you walk me through that, and then let's talk about that kind of moment where you went, okay, I need to bring this to other men that I work with.
Yeah. So the protocol I did was Ibogaine, followed by 5-MeO-DMT, which is a molecule that initially came from the Sonoran desert toad, and it has become so popular that they've moved to a synthetic version of it, which is it's the same molecule. It's fine. It's great. But the two together work very synergistic. And I think the Ibogaine beat me down and helped me kind of clear what was going on in terms of like my trauma and reset my central nervous system. And the 5-MeO-DMT really introduced me to more of a spiritual life. It was so profound. I really can't explain the experience, but if you're ever wondering whether there's a more powerful being or energy at play here, there's definitely no doubt if you can get to the right place. So that was my experience, and we just wanted to pay it forward. I mean, the change, it was so radical, my thinking, when I got out of my Ibogaine experience, that I turned to Amber. I saw her, she flew in, and I just said, this is exactly what the guys need. Like, this is it. Like, I can't even believe this has been hidden. I can't believe more people don't know about it. I turned to the doctor at the time, and I just said, hey, I assume thousands of veterans have done this. He's like, no, there's a few Marines, maybe a long time ago, or like one or two Marines or something. And then there was like one other SEAL, and I just said, why? I was like, almost got angry. And I turned to Amber, and I just said, this is it. Like, this is what they need. I mean, we're all doing the same shit. They're handing us antidepressants and anti-anxiety medications and antipsychotics for some, and medicine to go to sleep and medicine to stay awake, medicine to focus. And all you need is a plant medicine that's literally been on on this earth for thousands of years and been used the correct way for forever. And I'm sure we'll fuck that up somehow. But yeah, I mean, to me, I felt like I found the answer, and all I wanted to do was pay it forward. And so I didn't know how to do that. So I figured, well, I need to do it the same way that it was done for me. Kirk Parsley and Mikhail Vega, they worked in the background together to, raise a little bit of funding for me to be able to afford this treatment, because it's not cheap. Hopefully it gets cheaper, and we will have failed when psychedelic medicine does become federally legalized here, which MDMA will be within the year, psilocybin within the next 2 years. Psilocybin will be federally legalized in Oregon within the next year, and then so we're going to have to know how to be able to treat people of lower incomes, not just people who have $4,000 or $5,000 to spend on these things. Otherwise, we definitely have failed. But it's coming. It's happening. These medicines work, and you go back to vets. We wanted to pay it forward, so we started raising money on a grassroots effort. I think Amber's goal was to get 12 individuals over the next 12 months, and I believe we funded 35 individuals.
Wow,
that year. And then it just kind of naturally progressed, like grassroots effort. Found some really good individual donors that were really part of just really into what we were doing and knew we can drive change. And so we have a great donor base, believe in the cause. And we have funded now, I don't like to put a direct number on it, but it's several hundred. I'd say definitely over 500 that we have funded through the nonprofit for individuals to go outside the US and do these treatments. And we're treatment agnostic, so we're not a treating entity. We can't be a treating entity as a 501c3, but we can grant scholarships, and that's what we do. And so we have 3 pillars of vets. One is resources, meaning you apply, we grant you a scholarship, we give you the education about psychedelic medicine, how they started, how they're being used, where they're going. You make the choice as an individual, and you have to do it in a country where it's legal or unregulated, or we will not grant you that scholarship. And so we have vetted retreats and clinics all throughout the world that we know are safe and that are doing good work. And so we provide somewhere between 150 and 200 scholarships a year. In our database, we actually have thousands of applications, and we just can't keep up with the demand right now. It's crazy. So we provide resources. We are focused also now on research. Without research, we can't move the dial in DC with the lawmakers. So we have several studies going on. We have a study with Stanford that's just finishing up the treatment portion. 30 individuals with mild traumatic brain injury. They're going to do Ibogaine. They do fMRI, imaging, and a bunch of cognitive batteries. And so that study is very promising. I think you're going to hear a lot about it in the next about year to year and a half when those results come out. And then we have some data collection efforts going on with Ohio State and Johns Hopkins, and we have several other proposals in hand, psilocybin with 5-MeO-DMT, with MDMA, couples therapy through the VA. And so there's a lot happening. And so that's the research efforts, and that costs money, as you know. And then the third pillar is advocacy work. So, Amber and I, and along with the vets team, we've grown to a pretty significant team now. It's just some amazing individuals that we're working with. Our efforts in Washington, D.C., lobbying and talking to lawmakers and educating just kind of what we do, where we came from, why this is working. They'll look at us and say like, hey, we're not we're not hippies at Woodstock that were just kind of running around, on these medicines, utilizing them as recreational drugs. Like these are powerful medicines that, when used correctly, are literally life-changing and life-saving for generations. And so we really need to pour money into more research. We need to allow access to these medicines right here in the US for people who are suffering, to be able to have the same experience that myself and, all the others that have come through and that are doing these. This stuff is happening all over the place, whether it's legal or illegal. Unfortunately, we can only fund obviously legitimate, above board, individuals that are going for these treatments in, like I said, places that are legal or unregulated. But people are getting healing everywhere on their own, because like, what would you do if you weren't getting the success you needed or the treatment you needed? And you'd probably go find out where these are being offered, and you'd go, you'd go pay money or whatever. So we just have to, we believe that these have to be done correctly. We do believe that they need some oversight, and it needs to be regulated. I'm not convinced yet that these medicines just need to be like turned into the market, just kind of like as a free for all, for people to use, who they want, when they want. These are powerful. Like these medicines are nothing to take lightly. They should be approached with like huge respect. There needs to be a ton of preparation prior to having these experiences. And then there needs to, on the back end, a significant portion of integration support from therapists after, to bring that person back into reality. And if you can, take these psychedelic drugs and then wrap them into just an amazing therapeutic program, you have a formula that can't be touched.
Absolutely.
And hundreds of people on here tell you the same exact story.
Yeah, well, like I said, several have been on this podcast too, and it's something. It just makes so much sense to me, and the perspective, the lens that I've had with the epic failure of the prohibition of drugs has been as a firefighter and a paramedic. So I've pulled 15-year-old, a sheet over a 15-year-old corpse that has, died from some drug deal gone wrong, or protecting his quote unquote turf. I've watched the homelessness, the prostitution, the overdoses. So, that anyone who puts their hand on their heart as a first responder knows that has created so much death and destruction. And we've empowered the underworld, and we've, driven the people having mental health crises that turn to addiction into the shadows. And, sadly, we find their corpses. The other side of the conversation is that we have men and women that fight for America, UK, Australia, who then come home and cannot seek the very treatment that actually heal them for the service that they gave to their country without going overseas. And that is another, completely unacceptable element. And just as you said, the kind of, if there's some acceptance, people are like, oh yeah, but I don't think people should be able to have access to them. Well, we're not talking about putting meth in, the supermarket. We're talking about decriminalizing it. You're caught with meth. You're not thrown into a prison cell. You're funneled into mental health help and addiction help. And it's the same with this. No, MDMA and psilocybin shouldn't be, in the shops. Or maybe recreational psilocybin, maybe, I don't know, but Ibogaine and those kind of things that are therapeutic should absolutely be in the hands of the well-trained medical community that are familiar with those, and the counselors. And I had
at least accessible, right? Right.
Yeah, exactly. So, and I had Dr. Ben Sessa on, who's from the University of Bristol in the UK, and they have amazing success with MDMA-led therapy, and they don't prescribe MDMA. You don't leave and then go to a rave on your own. You have MDMA, your kind of internal walls come down, you go through a counseling session. I think it's 3 of them. It's like 1 week, 3rd week, and then 6 weeks, and then that's it. And they're seeing this continue to work. Now, I, as a young man in the UK, could find MDMA anywhere recreationally, but they cannot use that. It's purely in their research. So again, whether it's psilocybin, whether it's Ibogaine, whether it's, MDMA, these are proven to work. And yet our ridiculous backward prohibition laws that were founded on racism and job justification have continued to stack the bodies for the last 80 years. So we talk about show me the studies. Well, there's the most epic longitudinal study of what a fucking complete failure prohibition is. And here's yet another conversation that underlines why we need to decriminalize some of these drugs, put them back in the hands of the medical community so we can start healing our first responders and our veterans and everyone else who can benefit from it on our own country's soil.
Yeah, I agree. We have to turn into a health problem, not into a criminal problem. Like you just mentioned, those individuals that are hooked on some of these drugs, like you throw them in a jail, like what's going to happen? They're going to get worse. Like it's not like they're going to get any better, but if you take that individual and we rehabilitate that person and try to put them back into society, I mean, I know it's easy to say, difficult to execute, but much better than the alternative, which is just to like throw everybody in jail who just get caught with like, I don't know, a bag of mushrooms in their pocket or, some cocaine or whatever. Again, it's case by case scenario. So I'm not going to sit here, but we've seen the war on drugs has completely failed and wasted a ton of money, for certain. And both sides of the aisle will say that now. So that's not a partisan thing. It's definitely a bipartisan issue.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, smuggling, selling, that's a whole different conversation. I'm talking about personal use for the addict.
Yeah, personal use. So, and going back to your MDMA conversation around PTSD, Amber and I are working closely with the VA right now and with, Rick Doblin of MAPS to really build these studies, the clinical trials around couples MDMA therapy, for the VA. It's going to, we want to have access to these medicines as soon as possible. So the faster we can, build these trials and show that these medicines are quite effective and more effective than what's currently being offered, the quicker they will be able to get in the hands of, first responders, military veterans, and, even low income, the low income population, which again, I think we have failed if these medicines are only offered for wealthy individuals that can afford them, because insurance is not going to pay, I don't think, for a while. That's going to take some time. But we have to have, also a robust data collection effort to make sure that we're showing that these drugs are efficacious and they're working, because we still have to play, I feel, within the system. You could say, screw the system. I say, yeah, you know what? A lot of the system doesn't work. A lot of the system does work. We just have to figure out how to, find the right way to work with the system to allow these medicines to be accessed.
Absolutely. Well, for people listening, where can they find VETS? And VETS is Veterans Exploring Treatment Solutions. So where can they find that online? If they're out there hurting, how can they put an application in? And then also, how can they donate if they're in a position to do that? Yeah,
excellent. So if those out there that are listening, we are at vetsolutions.org. That's VET solutions.org. There's a ton of material on the website. There's application under healing grants on the drop-down menu under healing grants. There's an e-course that we had built that's just phenomenal. We get people all the time that, send in notes and just compliment on how well that course was put together. And it's a really great, it's kind of like Psychedelics 101, but it takes you all the way back to how they were, where they started, how they were initially intended for use, and kind of how they've grown to where they're at today and how they're being used for all different type of issues. So vetsolutions.org. There's also a donate button on the website. I believe we're accepting cryptocurrencies now. We'd like to accept them now that they're down, so we can sell them. But yeah, please support us. Follow us on Instagram. Follow us on LinkedIn. I think we also have a Facebook page, I'm sure.
Beautiful. Well, Marcus, I just want to say thank you so much. I mean, firstly, the work that you're doing, as with so many people I had on here, that as I mentioned before, leave a position of service and then carry on to serve outside. But also to have the courage and vulnerability to tell your story, because as I'm sure you found yourself, it's that kind of storytelling. It's that kind of door opening, as it were, that saves lives. This facade of masculinity that we were raised on, the kind of John Rambo, John Wayne bullshit, I think is the reason we've been to a lot of funerals, you and I both. So by having these conversations, that someone from SEAL Team 6 can tell the story that they do and continue to. I mean, I hate the fact that you're still struggling and you're getting these symptoms now that are worrying you, but that's the reality of these journeys that we're on, mid and post service. So I just want to say thank you so much for being so generous with your time today.
Yeah, James, thank you. And just for the record, I'm in a great place. I'm in the best place I've ever been, ever. Mentally, spiritually. I am having some headaches that I don't like, and so I'm just a little concerned about that. So I will get those checked out. But in terms of like quality of life and how I am just emotionally and spiritually, like I can't ask for more. And again, I go back to my first journey in 2017 that has helped pave the way for everything else.